wanted to talk a little bit more about what I mean with the distinction between primary psychopaths or sociopaths and secondary sociopaths. Again, I'm trying to get in the habit of referring to the whole group of psychopaths, sociopaths, and malignant narcissists, and anyone on that spectrum at the clinical, to a clinical degree, as sociopaths rather than psychopaths, because my experience is that people's eyes sort of gloss over when you use the word psychopath. They think that they know what you're talking about, even if they've never really looked into it. They just, they think that they've gleaned through the ether and generally through Hollywood what the nature of that beast is. So anyway, what I mean by a primary sociopath is that they're biologically born that way, hardwired, and it's important to understand that we're all genetically coded for sociopathy. My theory is that at some point there was a genetic bottleneck that, or multiple genetic bottlenecks, where the population of the planet was reduced to the point where primary psychopathy was a huge evolutionary advantage, where there was an actual advantage to having no remorse, no scruples whatsoever about doing whatever it took to survive and reproduce. And if those individuals in our evolutionary past didn't exist, we probably would not have survived those cataclysms. So we're all carrying this around with us, and that's fairly uncontroversial that we're all genetically encoded with this stuff. But that doesn't mean that we are all manifesting varying degrees of it. That's a genotype-phenotype issue. So, but if you eliminated all of the phenotypical sociopaths on the planet today, the next generation would have just the same number, because as I said, we're all carrying it around. So you can't. So there's no solution to. There's a lot of people that fantasize about, like, taking out all the psychopaths in these rabbit holes once you get into this subject. But it's not. It doesn't work that way. So what is going on is that as I've mentioned in other videos, there's a lot of traumatized people also who are normally functioning people who are traumatized to the point where they adopt certain coping strategies that are typical of psychopaths or sociopaths. So those people are what I mean when I say secondary psychopaths or secondary sociopaths. And one of the shorthands for me is if somebody, it seems like to me, if you read about some ruthless investment banker or something that at some point in his life throws himself off a bridge or I think that those are people that, it's at least plausible that those are people who have adopted sociopathic perspectives and worldviews and said, well, if that's the way the world works, then I'm going to get mine. And they do, but at some point they get they realize that they've become a monster, and they can't live with themselves anymore. A primary sociopath, from what I've been able to find out, is extraordinarily unlikely to ever take their own life. They're quite pleased with themselves. Early in the study of this phenomenon, clinicians would refer to it as moral insanity, and they were perplexed because these people were clearly not normal and not functioning on lots of important levels, but they were very functional on other levels, and they were quite pleased with themselves most of the time. They thought all the problems were other people's problems. So it's, it goes back to the Equus thing, like, well, where's the real problem here, but that's a subject again for another video. Equus is a big important reference point for me for lots of artistic and philosophical reasons, but and psychological reasons, but that's another subject.